I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
President, we thank USG for political and peace-building affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, USG for peace operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, and USG for humanitarian affairs, Tom Fletcher, for the detailed briefing on the situation in Lebanon. We've carefully listened to civil society representatives. President, today's emergency meeting of the Security Council in relation to the latest round of confrontation in Lebanon is taking place in the context of and directly connection with the unprecedented escalation in the Middle East caused by the continued aggression of the U.S. and Israel against Iran. However, our Western partners might try to turn things on their heads and misportray what is happening. It is the American and Israeli military escapade that is plunging the overall region ever deeper into chaos, taking an ever-rising number of human lives and causing irreversible damage to civilian infrastructure. Serious consequences are already being felt by many Middle Eastern countries that we count among our friends. Unfortunately, Lebanon is no exception to this. It has once again suffered large-scale attacks from Israel. It is telling that even before the current escalation, Israeli leadership had repeatedly and openly threatened Lebanon with a renewal of large-scale military action. Judging by the public statements by representative of the General Staff of the IDF, plans to clear the Lebanese territory had long been in the making. At the same time, the Israelis have been repeatedly violating the agreements of 2024 that were reached with the mediation of the U.S. and France when it comes to withdrawing their contingents to the south of the Blue Line, as well as when it comes to stopping arbitrary attacks and strikes on Lebanon. President, we'd like to emphasize that we have always shared and continue to understand the legitimate concerns of our Israeli partners when it comes to the security of their country. We understand the motivations that caused West Jerusalem to begin their military operation against Lebanon. The military action of March 2nd against Israel and subsequent missile and drone attacks on the central region of Israel could, of course, only lead to extreme alarm and concern. At the same time, we believe that the IDF's response over the past 10 days was disproportionate and excessive. As seen in regular reports from the UN Secretariat, the Israelis are ignoring norms of international humanitarian law, conducting strikes against civilian targets, inter alia, which have led to many casualties among the civilian population. Over the past 4 days alone, the Israeli armed forces have attacked more than 60 towns. The disproportionate response of West Jerusalem is clearly demonstrated by the number of casualties of the creeping Israeli invasion. According to the Lebanese Ministry of Health, since March 2nd, about 500 people have died, including 80 children, and the number of wounded is in the hundreds. At the same time, on a near daily basis, the Israeli command is publishing evacuation warnings for densely populated regions of Lebanon, including the southern and capital suburbs, leading to mass panic among local residents. Hundreds of thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes and seek shelter. The number of IDPs is estimated at 400 to 800,000 people, which, given the dire socioeconomic situation of Lebanon, will inevitably lead to problems with meeting basic needs, including access to food. President, the continued escalation, besides the dire humanitarian consequences, is jeopardizing the protection and integrity of cultural heritage in Lebanon. During the previous Israeli military campaign, we witnessed the serious damage done to historic monuments of the Arab Republic. including sites in Baalbek and Tyre, which were on the UNESCO World Heritage List. The current Israeli operation has directly affected the Russian Culture House in the city of Nabatea, which is operating jointly with the Russian Development Aid Agency. On March 8th, after a targeted missile strike, the 5-story building of the Russian Culture House was destroyed. We strongly condemn this attack. We view it as an act of military aggression against an institution that was acting solely for humanitarian educational purposes. Lebanese children have long attended classes in that house. No military activities were carried out there. We once again warn that indiscriminate attacks on civilian targets and diplomatic missions in Lebanon are unacceptable. On March 8th, 4 employees of the Iranian embassy in Beirut were killed, and yesterday the Russian General Consulate in Isfahan was struck. This is unacceptable. In addition, attacks on personnel of UNIFIL deployed in the south of the country are unacceptable. In this context, we join the position of the Secretary General of the UN, who on March 6th condemned an incident involving a UNIFIL contingent, as a result of which 3 Ghanaian peacekeepers were wounded. We wish them a speedy recovery and call for unconditional guarantees of the safety of peacekeepers. President, in the current explosive environment, we call on West Jerusalem to refrain from using force in its interactions with Lebanon and to return to upholding its international legal obligations, including under Resolution 1701 of the Security Council. Instead of its destructive, confrontation-oriented policy, it is high time for the Israeli leadership to listen to the position of Beirut, which favors immediate de-escalation and is prepared for direct negotiations with Israel. Equally important in this context is the decision of the Lebanese government itself to strengthen state institutions and to establish control over all parts of the country. For our part, we reiterate our unchanged support for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Lebanon, as well as the mandate of UNIFIL in accordance with the relevant SC resolutions. We believe that there's no alternative to immediately ceasing hostilities, returning to political and humanitarian efforts, and taking real steps to prevent a broader war in the Middle East. We believe that diplomatic efforts have not yet been exhausted. The parties ought to show political will and to refrain from further violence. These were our aims in preparing the Russian draft resolution of the Security Council on the escalation in the Middle East, distributed a few days ago, which will be examined today in the Council. Our document, unlike the text promoted by our colleagues from Bahrain, is non-confrontational in nature and takes into account the regional dimension of current events, including the suffering of the Lebanese people. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Russia for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. I thank USG DiCarlo, USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and Ms. Harfouche for their briefings. The current escalation of fighting in the Middle East is spreading, and the situation between Lebanon and Israel has also sharply intensified. The continuation of hostilities serves the interests of no party. The international community should pool its efforts to promote peace, de-escalate the tensions ASAP so as to restore peace and stability in the region. First, an immediate ceasefire must be promoted to end the fighting. Recently, Hezbollah and Israel has continued to exchange fire. Israel has launched intense attacks on towns in southern Lebanon and on Beirut. expanding its military control over southern Lebanon. These attacks have already resulted in the deaths of more than 570 people, including a large number of women and children. We have noted that Iran's letter to the Security Council stating that 4 Iranian diplomats were killed in the attack. Now, we call on all parties to cease hostilities, promote de-escalation, and fulfill their obligations under international law, in particular international humanitarian law. Israel should immediately withdraw its troops from Lebanon. We welcome the positive statement by the Lebanese government expressing its commitment to ending the conflict and support safeguarding Lebanon's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. Second, Lebanon should be supported in stabilizing its domestic situation. The heavy shelling has dealt a severe blow to Lebanon's security and stability. More than 700,000 people have been displaced, and already difficult humanitarian situation has further deteriorated. The international community should increase assistance to Lebanon and support the Lebanese government in stabilizing domestic situation and ensuring the basic livelihood of the people. We have taken note of the decision by the Lebanese parliament to extend its term. We welcome the efforts of the Lebanese government to strengthen governance over the country and hope that all parties in Lebanon will actively engage in political dialogue and properly resolve the differences. Third, the safety of UNIFIL personnel must be effectively ensured. On March the 6th, an attack against UNIFIL injured 3 peacekeepers. China strongly condemns the attack and expresses its sympathies to the injured. Any deliberate attack on UN's peacekeepers constitutes a serious violation of international humanitarian law and Security Council Resolution 1701 and must be firmly opposed and held accountable. The current tensions once again highlights the important role of UNIFIL. China urges all parties to ensure the safety and freedom of movement of UNIFIL personnel so that the mission can effectively carry out its mandate. China stands ready to work with the international community to make unremitting efforts to calm the situation between Lebanon and Israel and to restore peace and stability in Lebanon and the Middle East region. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
Mr. President, allow me at the outset to thank France for requesting this important briefing. The Kingdom of Bahrain, Denmark, Greece, Latvia, and the United Kingdom joined this request. I also thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Mr. Tom Fletcher, Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, and Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, and Ms. Lynn Harfouch for their important and valuable briefings. I also welcome all permanent representatives with us today. Mr. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain deeply regrets the recent dangerous military escalation in the region as a result of the unjustified Iranian attacks, which have targeted my country, the Kingdom of Bahrain, and a number of other brotherly Arab states, in clear violation of the principles of good neighborliness and respect for the sovereignty of states, and in grave breach of international law and the UN Charter. The Kingdom of Bahrain calls upon the Islamic Republic of Iran to immediately cease these hostilities and stop using its proxies and armed militias in the region and beyond. We warn that the continuation of these blatant acts of aggression will lead to further escalation and exacerbate existing tensions, with potentially serious repercussions on regional security and stability. Mr. President, We stress our support for the unity, sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of the Lebanese Republic. We support efforts to extend Lebanese state authority over all its territory, thereby strengthening its constitutional institutions, preserving security and stability, and fulfilling the aspirations of its brotherly people for a free and dignified life, development, and prosperity. Bahrain also emphasizes the importance of sparing Lebanon the repercussions of regional escalation and rejects any attempts to drag it into ongoing regional conflicts. We welcome the decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers on March 2nd, 2026, regarding the immediate ban on all security and military activities of Hezbollah and restricting its activities to political and legal work. In addition to the start of the second phase of the plan to impose the monopoly of the Lebanese state and its legitimate institutions on weapons, particularly the Lebanese army and official security forces. We stress that this step is an important development and a sine qua non to promote the sovereignty of the Lebanese state and strengthen its institutions in line with the Lebanese constitution and relevant international resolutions, especially Security Council Resolution 1701 and the Ta'if Agreement. This promotes and strengthens internal stability and promotes the Lebanese state's ability to fulfill its national responsibilities and maintain Lebanon's security and stability. The Kingdom of Bahrain also welcomes the call by His Excellency, the Lebanese President Joseph Aoun, to hold direct negotiations with Israel under international auspices to reach an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon. Mr. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain is following with concern the violations of the ceasefire agreement signed between Lebanon and Israel in November 2014, as documented by the UNIFIL. The attacks by Hezbollah on Israel have led to the military escalation in Lebanon, resulting in the displacement of civilians and a worsening of the humanitarian situation. This could have repercussions extending to neighboring countries, further straining their resources and stability. In this context, we stress the need for all parties to adhere to the ceasefire agreement and refrain from any actions that undermine it. We stress that the protection of civilians and the alleviation of human suffering must remain at the heart of joint collaborative efforts. We also emphasize that the safety and security of UN peacekeeping forces is a legal and moral obligation for all parties, and that any attack against them is a clear violation of relevant Security Council resolutions. At the same time, we stress that any gradual withdrawal of UNIFIL forces emphasize the importance of providing the necessary support to the Lebanese armed forces to effectively deploy in southern Lebanon and carry out its mandate in preserving Lebanon's sovereignty, security, and stability. We also welcome the French initiative to hold an international conference to support the Lebanese armed forces and internal security forces in April 2026. We also appreciate the efforts of the Lebanese Quintet Committee, namely the United States, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the State of Qatar, the Arab Republic of Egypt, and the French Republic in providing political, economic, and security support to Lebanon during this phase. In conclusion, the Kingdom of Bahrain reiterates that the stability and sovereignty of Lebanon represent a shared regional and international interest. We call upon all parties to adhere to the relevant international resolutions, respect the ceasefire agreement, and spare Lebanon and the region further escalation. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. Panama is grateful for the convening of this briefing and also for the information shared by the briefers about the developing situation in Lebanon. We extend our greetings to the representatives of the countries that honor us with their participation. Although in November 2024, a cessation of hostilities was reached, incidents and violations along the Blue Line have continued to be recorded since then, which shows the persistent lack of political will that would be needed to create the conditions conducive to peace. Leaderships that sustain themselves through a logic of permanent confrontation end up dragging their populations into cycles of destruction which leave in their wake devastated cities, displaced families, and generations scarred by war. Panama condemns the attacks launched from Lebanese territory against Israel by Hezbollah, which have forced communities to evacuate and seek shelter. These irresponsible actions are profoundly detrimental to the Lebanese civilian population and also to the refugee communities present in the country, because they have helped unleash a dangerous dynamic of escalation, which has led to an intense military response and to an even greater deterioration of the humanitarian situation. According to recent figures from the Lebanese authorities and humanitarian organizations, more than 700,000 people have been displaced within Lebanon in recent days, while almost 600 people have died. Among them, dozens of children, women, and humanitarian and rescue workers. Many of these families have sought refuge in schools and improvised shelters, which demonstrates the scale of the humanitarian crisis that is underway. Panama calls for the maximum restraint and the immediate cessation of hostilities. We urge the parties to fully comply with their obligations under international law, in particular international humanitarian law, and to adopt all necessary measures to protect the civilian population and infrastructure. Panama reiterates its support for the state and government of Lebanon, whose efforts to preserve internal stability and to strengthen the authority of the state throughout its territory are essential, including the role of the Lebanese armed forces in ensuring that the monopoly and control of arms lies exclusively with the state. We take note of the recent statements by the President of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, reiterating his country's readiness to resume negotiations with Israel with the aim of stopping the current escalation, and also the measures announced by the Lebanese authorities to restrict the military activities of Hezbollah. We reaffirm our full recognition of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of Lebanon in accordance with its internationally recognized borders. A safe and stable Lebanon, a secure and stable Lebanon with institutions that can fully exercise their authority through the actions that the current governmental administration of Lebanon have been carrying out, is essential for the stability of the entire region. Mr. President, the support of the United Nations to preserve relative stability along the Blue Line in recent decades has been and continues to be essential in order to avoid greater escalations of violence. That notwithstanding, in recent months, the presence of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon has suffered repeated attacks, increasing the risks for personnel and its facilities. We robustly reject these attacks. Last week, 3 blue helmets from the Ghana contingent were wounded while they were within a mission position in the south of Lebanon. Attacks or actions that compromise the security and integrity of the personnel, facilities, and property of the United Nations are unacceptable. Blue helmets that are implementing the mandates of this Council, as well as the positions and infrastructure of the mission, must be respected and protected at all times in accordance with international law. Panama reiterates its firm support and backing for the work of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon. We must also recall that that force is in the final phase of its mandate before the planned withdrawal process. And it is precisely for that reason that it is even more important to preserve the conditions of stability on the ground, to ensure the freedom of movement of the mission, and to allow it to fully carry out the tasks entrusted to it by this Council. We reiterate the urgent appeal for the greatest restraint and the immediate cessation of hostilities. President, the current situation once again demonstrates the importance of the full implementation of and compliance with Resolution 1701 of the Security Council. This resolution continues to be the fundamental framework for guaranteeing stability along the Blue Line and for moving towards a lasting solution. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank USG DiCarlo, USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and Ms. Harfouch for the comprehensive and valuable briefings. Lebanon is a country of remarkable diversity, shaped by layers of civilization and a rich cultural and historical legacy. Its people have long shown resilience in the face of adversity, preserving a vibrant social fabric rooted in coexistence among communities and traditions. Lebanon needs a period of calm to pursue its objectives of peace and stability. The renewed escalation and hostilities are a matter of great concern. They threaten far more than infrastructure. They endanger civilian life and risk reversing the fragile political and security progress Lebanon had begun to make preceding the current crisis. In this context, allow me to make 4 points. First, Pakistan reiterates its full support for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We condemn in the strongest terms Israel's continued military aggression in southern Lebanon, which has resulted in the death of more than 400 civilians, including at least 83 children and 42 women, and over 600,000 people displaced. Sweeping illegal evacuation orders across large parts of southern Lebanon have deepened civilian suffering. The large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure and the blatant disregard for international humanitarian law must cease immediately. Second, the use of force must remain the exclusive prerogative of the Lebanese state through its legitimate institutions. In this regard, the Lebanese armed forces play a central role, and Pakistan supports efforts to strengthen their capacity and operational effectiveness. Pakistan welcomes the efforts of the government of Lebanon to restore stability and strengthen state authority, including the cabinet decision of 2nd March to reinforce national security structures. We also note Lebanon's de-escalation initiatives, including the 4-point plan advanced by its leadership to restore calm and stability. Third, Pakistan strongly condemns attacks on UN peacekeepers serving with UNIFIL, who have been injured in Israeli strikes. Peacekeepers operating under the UN flag carry out a vital mandate authorized by the Council. Their safety and security must be guaranteed at all times. Fourth, Israeli military activities in southern Lebanon, including the continued presence of forces and the establishment of positions inside Lebanese territory, are illegal and unacceptable. These Israeli actions, which are in contravention of international law, are also undermining the efforts of the government of Lebanon to ensure peace and stability in the country. We call for Israel's immediate, full, and unconditional withdrawal from all occupied Lebanese territories. Sustainable calm requires the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701 and unwavering respect for Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity along the Blue Line. Mr. President, we echo the Secretary General's deep concern regarding the regional military escalation since 28th February, which has gravely undermined the November 2024 cessation of hostilities agreement. The situation in Lebanon cannot be viewed in isolation from this broader escalation across the Middle East. Heightened confrontation and unjustified attacks on several brotherly countries, which Pakistan has condemned, have gravely aggravated regional security and stability. At this critical juncture, dialogue and diplomacy must prevail over confrontation. De-escalation, restraint, and renewed diplomatic engagement are urgently required to prevent further deterioration of the regional security environment. Only through sustained political dialogue and respect for international law can the region move towards stability and peace. To conclude, Mr. President, Pakistan stands firmly with the government and people of Lebanon. The international community must take urgent action to prevent further escalation, alleviate human suffering, and support Lebanon's efforts to restore peace and stability across its territory. I thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Mr. President, I thank the United States in their capacity as President of the Security Council for this month for organizing this meeting. I also thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, and Mr. Tom Fletcher, Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. We also thank the briefer for her information. Mr. President, official reports and recent news show that the humanitarian situation in Lebanon is delicate. As at the 7th of March, more than 100,000 people were seeking shelter. Since the 2nd of March, almost 1 million people have been displaced within the country. Hundreds of thousands more have been affected by broad evacuation orders. A high number of civilian victims has been recorded, including women and children. There have also been attacks verified against health care facilities, and the safety, security, and life of peacekeeping personnel has been compromised. This demonstrates a crisis that is progressing quickly and which requires an urgent international response. In the past 2 years, we have witnessed how, in this region specifically, the use of force and disdain for international law can affect the lives of millions of people. Colombia expresses its grave concern over the serious escalation seen in recent days in the region, and on the subject of this meeting, by the deterioration of the situation in Lebanon. We urge all of the parties to respect and fully implement Resolution 1701, to exercise maximum restraint, and to guarantee the protection of the civilian population and of United Nations personnel. My country is convinced that it is essential to insist on a return to peaceful means, dialogue, mediation, and the existing dispute settlement mechanisms. They must be used urgently to facilitate a sustained de-escalation and to create the conditions that would make it possible to protect communities on both sides of the blue line. At the same time, Colombia wishes to express its solidarity with the Lebanese people and with all of the victims affected by the events of recent weeks. Respect for the sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity of Lebanon is non-negotiable. We reaffirm that full compliance with the United Nations Charter and with the relevant resolutions of the Security Council is crucial. Moreover, we recognize the efforts of the government to maintain effective control over its territory and the steps that have been taken to avoid an escalation of hostilities and to avoid the country being dragged into a broader conflict. Recent decisions by the Lebanese government, including the four-point plan announced by its president, are signs of the efforts being made to achieve a rapid de-escalation of the situation and to protect its population. As regards the humanitarian dimension, the situation requires immediate and practical measures. It is essential that safe corridors and access for assistance be facilitated, that security guarantees for humanitarian personnel be ensured, and that essential services be restored in areas affected by the hostilities. These actions are preconditions for the effective protection of civilians and for the stabilization of the situation on the ground. We recall that the parties are obliged to respect the relevant principles of international humanitarian law. Strict compliance with those obligations is essential in order to halt the deterioration and to preserve life and human dignity. Mr. President, Colombia condemns any attack on United Nations personnel and emphasizes that the protection of its personnel and the inviolability of its facilities is essential. All parties have the legal and moral obligation to guarantee their security in accordance with international law and with the decisions of the Security Council. Any threat or attack undermines the UN's ability to maintain international peace and security, as well as to verify incidents and to provide humanitarian assistance. We wish to condemn the attack that took place on the 6th of March, and we express our solidarity with the members of the mission that were affected. UNIFIL continues to play an essential role, working with dedication to prevent the escalation of tensions and to protect civilian communities. Colombia reiterates its support and gratitude for the members of the mission, with the understanding that their work in such a complex context is essential. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3, namely the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, and my own country, Somalia. We thank USG DiCarlo, USG Lacroix, and USG Fletcher for their comprehensive briefings. We also thank Ms. Lynn Harfouch for her valuable contribution. We welcome the participation of the representative of Lebanon in today's meeting. The A3 views the escalation of hostilities in Lebanon since the beginning of March with the utmost gravity and concern. We are deeply alarmed by the mounting toll on human life and the destruction of civilian infrastructure, including densely populated residential areas. Furthermore, as reported by UNICEF, nearly 700,000 people, including 200,000 children, have been forced from their homes, adding to the tens of thousands already uprooted from previous attacks. In that regard, we call for the protection of civilians and full adherence to international humanitarian law and international human rights law. The A3 is also gravely concerned about the March 6th incident against the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, which resulted in injuries to 3 Ghanaian peacekeepers at their position in Al-Ghawza. This is a stark reminder of the perils faced by peacekeepers in Lebanon. The safety and security of United Nations personnel and property are not negotiable. They must be respected at all times and without exception. We wish a swift and complete recovery to all the injured peacekeepers. Mr. President, the A3 reaffirms its unwavering commitment to Lebanon's sovereignty, territorial integrity, unity, and political independence. Lebanon must not become a theater for proxy confrontations or unilateral territorial expansions. Respect for the blue line and the cessation of hostilities by all actors are essential for stability and the full implementation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701. We acknowledge the critical role UNIFIL continues to play in maintaining stability along the blue line. Its presence remains a critical element for the collective efforts to achieving peace in Lebanon and contribute to de-escalation. At the same time, the A3 underscores the importance of enhancing the capacity of the Lebanese armed forces to assume full responsibility for the defense of Lebanese territory. We urge the international community to intensify its support, including equipment, materials, and financial assistance to ensure their effective and sustainable deployment south of the Litani River. To conclude, Mr. President, the A3 calls for an immediate cessation of hostilities and an urgent return to the parameters of the 2024 ceasefire agreement. We emphasize that a renewed commitment to Resolution 1701 remains the primary framework for long-term stability. It's imperative that all parties prioritize dialogue and diplomacy over kinetic action to prevent a full-scale regional conflagration. Achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East is only viable through genuine commitment to diplomacy in accordance with international law and the UN Charter. We stand in solidarity with the people of Lebanon, and we urge this Council to act with unity and resolve to restore peace and uphold international law. I thank you.
Thank you to the representative of Somalia for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United States. I add my thanks and appreciation to all of our briefers today. Colleagues, the United States condemns the attacks that Hezbollah, a longtime proxy of the Iranian regime, has launched against Israel. Hezbollah has yet again made it clear that it does not represent nor does it defend the people of Lebanon. It defends the interest of the Iranian regime. It is nothing more than a proxy and, frankly, an obstacle to Lebanon becoming a peaceful, stable, and functioning state, something I think we all would like to see and encourage. We recognize Israel's legitimate security needs and its right to defend itself from the Iranian regime and Hezbollah, which are two sides of the same coin. And we ask all of you, we ask our colleagues, how long will the world continue to tolerate the Iranian regime as the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, sowing havoc around the world as it seeks to export its so-called revolution? I ask you, what country can legitimately say it's better off or more stable because of Iranian influence over the decades. Yemen? No. Lebanon? No. Syria? Absolutely not. Iraq? No. They're all trying to rid themselves of this cancer that has spread over the decades, this disease of instability and chaos. Thankfully, the United States and this administration is taking bold action to do just that. But to the end of ridding itself of this violence, death, and destruction, the United States welcomes the absolutely historic, and we should recognize it for what it is. We welcome the March 2nd decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers to immediately prohibit Hezbollah's military and security activities. We applaud them. As the government of Lebanon said in its letter to this council on March 2nd, these activities, the activities of Hezbollah, disregard the will of the majority of the Lebanese people. In fact, it's endangering them. That statement is an absolutely historic milestone on the road to ending Hezbollah's long and destructive influence in Lebanon. The next milestone is implementation, and Lebanon's security services must enforce this policy and prosecute those who violate it. Now is the time for the government of Lebanon to take back control of the entirety of its country. The United States absolutely supports that endeavor and that mission. We urge our friends in Lebanon to not let this moment slip away. Our message is clear. Take your country back. And we are all too happy to apply the time and treasure necessary to do that. The United States also commends the actions of the Lebanese government to expel Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which has undermined Lebanese sovereignty for decades and provides oxygen, provides money, provides weapons to Hezbollah's terrorist plots in Lebanon and across the globe. The world must now come together in supporting Lebanon's efforts. The world must come together now in supporting Lebanon's efforts to exercise its sovereignty across every inch of Lebanese territory. The United States stands with the Lebanese people who were dragged into yet another war by Hezbollah at the behest of Iran. We are responding to the civilian consequences of this recklessness by providing immediate, life-saving humanitarian assistance to hundreds of thousands of now displaced Lebanese. Since 2012, the United States has provided more than $4.4 billion in humanitarian assistance to support Lebanon. And we commend the many humanitarians on the ground who are aiding in this effort. We also express our hopes for the full recovery for the UNIFIL peacekeepers who were recently injured. Peacekeepers take on exceptional risks in these conflict zones for the advancement of peace and security. We recognize that, and we call on all parties to respect the safety and security of these men and women as they assume this important role. Colleagues, the international community must unite in supporting the Lebanese government and our Israeli partners in the full implementation of Resolution 1701. I think we've seen real progress in that regard. This council must condemn all acts that undermine Resolution 1701, and the way forward involves the international community standing firmly in support of Lebanon's efforts to exercise its territorial sovereignty and restore state authority. And we will continue to work alongside partners to create lasting peace and security in Lebanon. I thank you. I will resume my function as president of the council, and I give the floor to the representative of Lebanon for his statement.
Mr. President, at the outset, I thank you for convening this emergency session at the request of the French Republic, supported by the United Kingdom, Greece, Denmark, Latvia, and the Kingdom of Bahrain. I also thank Ms. DiCarlo, Mr. Lacroix, Mr. Fletcher, and Ms. Harfouch for the briefings they provided. Mr. President, we meet today at a moment when Lebanon finds itself trapped in a war that it did not choose between Israel and Hezbollah. Israel, which shows no respect for the laws of war and persists in its attacks on Lebanon, and Hezbollah, whose military and security activities have been banned and deemed illegal by the Council of Ministers. Once again, we are confronted with a painful reality that serves neither Lebanon nor the Lebanese people, who are facing death, devastation, and displacement. The number of Lebanese displaced has reached nearly 1 million, many of whom without shelters befitting human dignity. Every morning, we wake up to new casualties among innocent people, including women and children, and to warnings to evacuate entire areas and destruction of both private and public property. This creates extremely difficult conditions for the Lebanese government, which is striving to put Lebanon back on the path of recovery and reform and to rebuild its institutions. Mr. President, we wish to highlight that the Lebanese government has clearly expressed its full rejection and condemnation of the rocket attack claimed by Hezbollah on the 2nd of March. As we informed you in our letter on that same day, our government affirmed that this attack contradicts its decisions regarding the exclusive authority of the Lebanese state over matters of war and peace, and contradicts the principle of refusing to drag Lebanon into the ongoing regional war. This act also constitutes a violation of the cabinet's resolutions and aims at undermining the credibility of the Lebanese state. Mr. President, in our modern history, no Lebanese government has demonstrated this level of courage and determination to reclaim the state authority, to restrict weapons to legitimate state institutions, and to extend the state's control exclusively through its own forces over all Lebanese territory, in implementation of the Ta'if Agreement, which stipulated the dissolution of all Lebanese and non-Lebanese militias and the handover of their weapons to the Lebanese state, and to extend the state authority over all its territories, and in implementation of relevant international resolutions, including 1701, and an implementation of the government's ministerial declaration and related decisions, particularly the decision adopted on the 5th of August 2025. We recall that on the 2nd of March, the government issued a decision requiring the immediate prohibition of all Hezbollah military and security activities, deeming them illegal, and compelling Hezbollah to hand over its weapons to the Lebanese state and to confine its work exclusively to political activity within constitutional and legal frameworks. On the 5th of March, the Lebanese government adopted an additional decision tasking the security institutions with verifying the presence of members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in Lebanon and deporting them immediately upon identification. Another decision was issued requiring prior authorization for issuing entry visas to Iranian nationals seeking to visit Lebanon. Mr. President, we will not accept a return to the past. The Lebanese people do not want war, and the Lebanese government is moving forward in implementing its decisions and will not backtrack. However, our priority today is to stop this war, to protect our country and ensure the security and safety of our people. It is our right to live in peace and security in our homeland and our region. To this end, the Lebanese government has expressed its readiness to enter into negotiations with Israel under international auspices with civilian participation to settle all outstanding issues.
The President of the Republic called on the international community 2 days ago to support him and to implement the initiative he announced, consisting of the following: establishing a full truce, including a complete halt to all Israeli ground, naval, and air attacks on Lebanon. Second, expediting the provision of essential logistical support to the Lebanese armed forces. And third, enabling the Lebanese armed forces to take control of areas of tension, confiscate all weapons found there, and seize Hezbollah's arms and depots and warehouses in accordance with the available information. Fourth, simultaneously, Lebanon and Israel would begin direct negotiations under international auspices to implement all of the above. Mr. President, in support of the Lebanese government's efforts, this esteemed council is called upon to compel Israel to implement Resolution 1701, to respect the cessation of hostilities, to withdraw fully to internationally recognized borders, to end its repeated violations and breaches of Lebanese sovereignty, to release Lebanese detainees, to cease its threats to Lebanon's territorial integrity and political independence within its internationally recognized borders. We reaffirm Lebanon's attachment to the follow-up mechanism established under the Cessation of Hostilities Declaration pursuant to Resolution 2790. We also reiterate Lebanon's commitment to the truce agreement signed with Israel on the 3rd of March 1949, which is in the interest of both parties. Mr. President, we must also reiterate our condemnation of Iran's deliberate and unjustified attacks targeting the Gulf Cooperation Council states, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Iraq, and Syria. We express our full solidarity with these countries. We also condemn the attacks targeting Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Cyprus. We strongly denounce these reprehensible acts which Lebanon rejects unequivocally and without reservation. We also condemn the attacks against the UNIFIL from any source. We renew our gratitude to the UNIFIL, to the troop contributing countries, and to all personnel serving within this force, especially those who lost their lives in Lebanon in service of international peace and security. We strongly condemn the targeting of the Ghanaian battalion headquarters and express full solidarity with Ghana and UNIFIL's command, wishing the injured a swift recovery. Finally, Mr. President, Lebanon is facing an extremely dangerous moment and a true humanitarian catastrophe. While we work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our people and meet their basic humanitarian needs, any support or assistance to help ease the burden of this crisis is welcome and greatly appreciated. We reiterate once again that Lebanon will not accept to be turned into an arena for settling scores. We will continue striving to lead our nation out of this ordeal stronger and more resilient. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of Lebanon for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I would like to congratulate the United States for taking the presidency for the month of March, and I also would like to thank the briefers. Mr. President, since the 2nd of March, Hezbollah has launched wave after wave of attacks against Israel. More than 880 rockets and missiles, more than 60 UAVs, more than 15 anti-tank guided missiles. Hezbollah itself has been clear about why, and I quote, to avenge the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, not to defend Lebanon, not to protect Lebanese citizens, but to serve the agenda of the Iranian regime. Just days ago, they vowed to fight to the last breath. As we sit here today, Israeli families are running to bomb shelters as Hezbollah launches new attacks toward our communities. That is the reality we face. That is why Israel is now operating in Lebanon, to stop this threat. Mr. President, to understand where we are today, we must look at what has happened since October 7th. For years, Hezbollah grew into one of the most powerful non-state armed organizations in the world. It began way back in the 80s, when Lebanon was in the middle of a civil war. But over time, it became something more dangerous, a proxy army built by Iran, funded by Iran, trained by Iran, armed by Iran. By 2024, Hezbollah had between 150,000 and 200,000 rockets and missiles. Think about that. The largest arsenal ever held by a non-state actor. Think about your countries. Most of your countries do not have the capacity of 200 missiles and rockets. A war machine built over decades with one purpose: Israel's destruction. After Hamas's October 7th attacks, Hezbollah opened a second front from Lebanon. For months, Israel's northern communities came under fire. Rockets, drones, missiles launched across the border. We responded. Israel responded with targeted operations against Hezbollah's command networks and military infrastructure. I want to remind you that during that operation, senior leadership was eliminated, including their leader, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, a terrorist with blood on his hands. Command structures were disrupted. Around 3,000 fighters from the Radwan force were taken off the battlefield. They lost roughly 80% of its rockets' capability. The army Iran spent decades building, we broke it. But Hezbollah was not fully eliminated. We have to admit it. Instead of stepping back after the ceasefire, it rearmed, restocked, it rebuilt, and it did so with the help of the Iranian regime. During the first year after the ceasefire, Iran funneled more than $1 billion to Hezbollah. It continues to receive over $50 million every month to rebuild its military machine. Tehran funds it, Tehran arms it, Tehran directs it. Hezbollah pulls the trigger, but the Ayatollahs in Tehran pull the strings. All of this in direct violation of Security Council Resolution 1701. Mr. President, that resolution required the area between the Blue Line and the Litani River to be free of Hezbollah weapons and terrorists. You all voted on this resolution. I want to show you this map, which shows launch sites used by Hezbollah to fire rockets, missiles, and drones toward Israel. You know, look where they are. All those dots are south of the Litani River. Hezbollah should not be there. And from these locations, on the first day of these attacks, Hezbollah launched missiles toward Israel. You know, one of the village here, the village of Bargoz, small village. We have the intel about it. When they send a missile from those areas, southern of the Litani, it takes 30 seconds for the missile to land in Israel, in the northern part of Israel. 30 seconds. Imagine for a minute that you are driving with your family in your car, and you hear the sirens, and you have 30 seconds. You have to stop the car, you have to look for a shelter, and you have to decide which child you take first to the shelter if you cannot carry all of them. 30 seconds, that's what it takes. Mr. President, since the ceasefire came into effect, Israel has submitted 929 enforcement requests asking the Lebanese armed forces to dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure, launch sites, weapons depots, underground bunkers. However, the efforts of the Lebanese armed forces were not sufficient. Sites that were identified were not dismantled. Sometimes they came there, they took the pictures, and that was it. And today Hezbollah continues to fire rockets at Israel from those same areas. Last August, the Lebanese government instructed its military to prepare a plan to disarm armed militias in the country. We welcomed that decision. It was a momentous step. We also commend the recent statements of Prime Minister Salam declaring Hezbollah's current military activity against Israel illegal. Those are the right words, but the reality on the ground tells a different story. So I ask the Lebanese government, if Hezbollah is being dismantled, where is the evidence? Where are the operations against their launch sites? Where are the seizures of their weapons? Where is your military? Ambassador Arafa, Lebanon now stands at a pivotal moment in its history. The time has come to decide, will Lebanon stick to declarations or actually act? Because the question before you is very simple. Who controls Lebanon? The Lebanese government or Hezbollah, acting on behalf of the Ayatollahs in Tehran? Lebanon has a national army of more than 72,000 soldiers. Mobilize them, train them, empower them with the authority and resources to assert the sovereignty of the Lebanese state. We support peaceful negotiations. You know that. We spoke before the last operation. But today, as we speak, there are only two options on the table. Either the Lebanese government takes real action to restrain Hezbollah, or Israel will use its strength to dismantle this terrorist organization. There are no other options. You know, we can meet and talk in Akora, wherever you want, but not while Hezbollah is sending missiles into Israel. So Israel is acting. In recent days, the IDF has struck Hezbollah command centers and military infrastructure across southern Lebanon. The IDF has also carried out strikes against assets of Al-Qard al-Qassam network, Hezbollah's financial system used to fund its terrorist activity and rebuild its military capabilities. We have issued evacuation notices to protect Lebanese civilians because we face an enemy that deliberately places them in harm's way. Hezbollah hides behind civilians in Lebanon and firing at civilians in Israel. Mr. President, believe me, Israel does not want to be operating inside Lebanon. But Israel will not accept rockets fired at our people. As we speak, the Iranian regime is losing. And like many failing regimes, it is lashing out at its neighbors across the region, indiscriminately attacking civilians. You will meet at 3 p.m. to discuss that. And its proxy, Hezbollah, is doing exactly the same to Israel. Many countries in our region have drawn the right conclusion. They are distancing themselves from Tehran, strengthening their defenses, protecting their sovereignty. Lebanon now faces that same choice. Israel will continue confronting the terror network built by Tehran, and we will do whatever is necessary to ensure that rockets and terror can no longer threaten our people. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative for Israel for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank you for holding this important meeting. We also thank the Permanent Mission of France for its request to hold this emergency meeting alongside other countries. I would also like to thank briefers. The Syrian Arab Republic is concerned by the dangerous escalation in the region with its grave political, security, and economic repercussions, including on the brotherly country of Lebanon, its people, and its infrastructure. Syria reaffirms its support to the safety and security of Lebanon. We denounce the escalation and the bombing of Lebanon, as it will hinder the role of the Lebanese state to implement its functions and responsibilities, including its efforts to disarm Hezbollah. We also warn of the repercussions of the current conflict, which, if it continues, could expand in a way that contradicts the interest of Lebanon and the region, especially as this conflict coincides with repeated Israeli violations of Syria's sovereignty through aerial violations and ground incursion into Syria's territory and the occupation of new territory since the 8th of December 2024. We also welcome in this regard, Mr. President, and we thank the efforts of the United States, led by President Trump, for its role to mediate to resolve this issue. Mr. President, Syria rejects the policies of displacing civilians under the threat of bombing and destruction, as this has grave humanitarian repercussions on Lebanon and Syria, and they will be difficult to contain. Moreover, Syria welcomes the decision of the Lebanese government to reject any military or security activities from Lebanon outside the legal state's institutions. This same decision bans Hezbollah's security and military activities and compels Hezbollah to hand over its weapons to the Lebanese state in order to consecrate the state's monopoly on weapons and strengthen its sovereignty over its territory. Mr. President, since the fall of the former regime and to this day, Syria and Lebanon have adopted a new approach in their bilateral relations based on mutual respect and common interest. As a result, a number of official visits between the two countries were held to discuss political and technical issues. His Excellency, Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, yesterday made a phone call with His Excellency, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun, to discuss the current regional developments and their repercussions on the security and stability of the region. Both sides stressed the importance of maintaining the security and safety of both countries. President al-Shara expressed his support to the efforts of President Aoun to disarm Hezbollah and to spare the region the repercussions of the current conflict. Both sides reaffirmed the importance of coordination and cooperation between Syria and Lebanon to maintain the security and safety of both countries and their people, and to prevent any attempts to sow discord and destabilize the region. President al-Shara expressed his support to serious steps taken by the governments of Iraq and Lebanon to protect their countries and prevent any descent towards the conflict. We are convinced that Syria is affected by the direct and dangerous repercussions of this escalation. We believe that Syria's stability is a cornerstone for the stability of the Levant and the region. Therefore, we strengthened our defense forces along the borders with Lebanon and Iraq as a precautionary measure to prevent any spillover of this conflict to Syria's territory and to confront and combat cross-border organizations to prevent them from using Syria's territory to implement their foreign agendas in a way that runs counter with the interest of the Syrian people and the people of neighboring countries. Mr. President, Syria condemns in the strongest terms all forms of the ongoing Iranian attacks against the security and stability of the Arab Gulf countries and Jordan and Iraq. We stand in full solidarity with these countries that are subjected to these wanton attacks by Iran. We call for respecting their sovereignty and territorial integrity. My country also denounces all Iranian statements and procedures on the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, as this jeopardizes the freedom of navigation and international trade, in addition to the energy supplies that impact most countries of the world. Syria calls for de-escalation and for supporting the diplomatic track, as this current escalation is an existential threat for the entire region. It jeopardizes the global economic stability. Syria reaffirms its full and continued support to all efforts to strengthening stability in the region, to give precedence to dialogue and peaceful settlement to resolve the issues of the region and guarantee security and stability for all countries in the region. We also call on the Security Council to compel Israel to end its attacks against Lebanon and the Lebanese people. We reaffirm the unity and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We reaffirm the important role of the Lebanese armed forces as the guarantor of the security and stability of Lebanon. We also reaffirm the importance of preserving the safety of UNIFIL personnel in Lebanon and UNDOF in Syria. We denounce the attack against UNIFIL last Friday, which injured 3 peacekeepers. In conclusion, Mr. President, in solidarity with our brethren in the Arab Gulf countries and Jordan, Syria has co-sponsored the draft resolution before the Security Council tabled by the Kingdom of Bahrain on their behalf, which condemns the unjustified Iranian attacks and that calls for their end immediately. We call on all member states in your council to vote in favor of this resolution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Syria for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Cyprus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me first to congratulate you for the assumption of the presidency of this council and to thank the briefers for their updates. Madam President, Cyprus is a UN and EU member state most closely connected to the region, and Lebanon is not a distant issue for us. President Christodoulidis, also as Cyprus holds the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union, has been in constant touch with President Daoun as regards the escalating situation. We call on all parties to exercise utmost restraint. Civilians must always be protected, and international humanitarian law must always be respected as well. We condemn the attacks carried out by Hezbollah against Israel following the former's decision to align with the Iranian attacks. At the same time, while Israel has the right to self-defense in line with international law, we are concerned about the intensification of military operations which have caused mass displacement. Cyprus is steadfast in its support for Lebanon's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. We therefore welcome the recent decision of the Lebanese government to prohibit military and security activities and to disarm Hezbollah. We also welcome the public statements of the Lebanese Foreign Minister Raghi, who conveyed his strong condemnation of the reported drone attacks that may have originated from Lebanese territory towards the island of Cyprus. Strengthening state authority across the entire territory of Lebanon is essential. The monopoly on legitimate force must rest solely with the Lebanese armed forces. Cyprus has long supported the Lebanese armed forces and will continue to do so as a strategic priority. We will continue providing training and financial assistance, including through our participation in the Military Technical Committee for Lebanon. The full implementation of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701 remains essential for restoring stability along the Blue Line. Cyprus condemns the attacks against UNIFIL and reiterates its strong support to the force and its mandate. Allow me also to express our solidarity with the Ghanaian government whose contingent was attacked. UNIFIL peacekeepers' safety and security must be ensured at all times. Diplomacy remains the best path forward to lasting de-escalation. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Cyprus for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers, and the meeting is adjourned.